What's your dirty secret? Story 1. While I was around age 12, my dad died in a civil war. After about 2 years, my mom started a relationship with the dad of a female classmate of mine. She had lost her mom about 5 years back. Initially, I hated this new life. I hated my stepdad because I felt like that he is trying to replace my dad. But with time, things settled down and me and my stepsister fell in love. Mostly emotional support for our trauma, I guess. We never received any therapy. Never had sex because in our culture female virginity is kind of important. But we came pretty close. This continued to our early 20s, even through our university days. Both of us dated others just to cover things up. There was no realistic way for us to progress our relationship. So she agreed for an arranged marriage. Meanwhile, I immigrated to a different country. Still, we maintained a long-distance relationship. After 5 years, she found out that her husband was cheating on her. After a lot of fighting, he divorced her and she is now single. Luckily, she did not have a kid because she was in grad school. Now she is coming to the country that I am living as a graduate student in few months. In here it is legal for step-siblings to get married. But we are not planning to tell anybody that we are step-siblings. We actively avoid people from our country so that our secret is safe. We really don't have any idea how to keep it safe forever, but we don't care either. For the first time in my life since my dad's death, I am not depressed. I feel positively giddy when I think about future. I don't care if it is incest or not. We seriously cannot talk about this with anybody. Not even my therapist is going to hear full details. Story 2. I was 10 and lonely. My parents had been working day and night to get their startup business off the ground. It was the classic latchkey child scenario. As they say, idle hands are the devil's workshop. So after several months of spending my afternoons alone with microwave burritos and Transformers cartoons, I decided to diversify my entertainment selection. I proceeded to ransack the entire office, making it appear that a person had broken in and rummaged for money. I broke a window, 2 lamps, smashed the legs off a chair and pulled every file from the cabinets and tossed them around the room like confetti. I then called my mother and told her I'd just gotten home and found the place burglarized. She told me to get out of the house and called 911 on our way home. The cops arrived with their sirens blaring at about the same time she rolled up. They stormed the house with guns drawn, screaming, "Come out with your hands up!" When I saw them going all Delta Force through my front door, I knew that I had probably gone a little too far this time. Long story short, a detective came to take a report after the patrol cops had cleared the premises. As I was sitting on my living room sofa, surrounded by the tattered remains of my dirty work, the detective looked me dead in the eyes and said there was no break-in, was there? The man looked right into my soul and knew the truth. And I knew he knew, so lying was pointless. I burst into tears and started blubbering. He walked over, put his hand on my shoulder and said, "It'll be all right." Thankfully, I was young enough to escape any criminal charges. My parents weren't too harsh with their punishment either. I guess they figured it was more a cry for help than the actions of a burgeoning sociopath. For the next couple of years, they made sure someone was always home with me. Or they made sure I was signed up for an after-school program. Story 3. When I was in high school, me and my friend would write really random made-up stories to each other in class. She would write a bit, then I added onto it, etc. One of our characters was a crocodile, for some weird reason. And she thought it was funny to just randomly write crocodile in a textbook. I agreed it was funny, we were 15 and weird, and wrote the word crocodile in one of the toilets. We continued for a little bit, writing it here and there. Somehow, it caught on, other people started writing it everywhere, and it snowballed. It went from me writing the word crocodile really tiny in ballpoint pen on a toilet stall, to people vandalizing school property. At that point, I didn't find it funny anymore and wanted it to stop. But nobody could find out I was one of the ones who started it, because they threatened to expel if they ever found the person behind it. It went so far as the school principal threatening to question every person in school to find out if someone knew who started it. I was scared to death someone would find out, because I've always been a goody two-shoes. To this day, nobody outside of that friend knows I was involved, but I've always felt really guilty about starting it. Story 4. I won $41K a few years ago. Immediately gave $25K to my parents to clear any debt. Left me with $16K. Shortly after I received my trust fund of roughly $4K. I was 18 years old with $20K in the bank. This should have set me up for a long time. All of my family think I have most of the money, but the truth is it's all gone. I went through a really rough patch with my mental health and threw it all away on drugs, alcohol, and impulse purchases to try and feel something. Anything. Short term, sure, it gave me a little buzz. Fast forward to now, I've got nothing. It's all gone and I hate myself for it. I live paycheck to paycheck all whilst trying to pretend I'm financially stable. Part of me wants to just tell them and get it off my chest. The other part is scared of their reaction when I tell them I blew $20K on total shit. I get it was my money, but I'm so disappointed in myself. More so for the $4K in my trust fund. It took years for my parents to build that up. Literal years. And now it's gone. Story 5. A few years back I went on holiday with my then girlfriend and her family. We went out one night for a birthday celebration and came home late after lots of drinks and a nice meal. There were 5 of us staying in a small, one-bedroom apartment with an extra fold-out couch and a roll-away bed. The morning after the celebration, I was the first awake. I needed to use the bathroom, but didn't want to stink out the small apartment. So I dressed and left to look for a public bathroom and to enjoy a morning walk. I did not know the area and soon got busy exploring. Once I got moving, the urge to use the bathroom faded and I relaxed, walking leisurely. Sometime later, I had wandered a very long way from our apartment. Maybe a half-hour walk away. Suddenly, the need to use the bathroom returned with overwhelming urgency. I continued walking, my eyes sharpened for a public restroom. I could not find one. The urgency increased with every passing minute. I found that I was quite far from any shops and was between a large public reserve and a busy road. I began to panic as I felt my stomach bloating and my bowels tensing. I was running out of time. I had reduced my walk to an uncomfortable waddle when, like an island in a stormy sea, I finally spotted a small public restroom block up ahead of me. Overjoyed, I hastened to it. I was absolutely frantic and felt like I could not hold on for a minute longer. I burst into the men's room and rushed to the first stall. It was overflowing with shit and toilet water. I freaked and jumped across to the next stall. Locked. An out-of-order sign on the door. There were no more stalls. Beads of sweat rolled down my forehead. My breathing was short and shallow. I had never wet or soiled myself before, but I knew that this was it. I could not hold on any longer. I had an idea. I ran from the men's room and took a quick glance up and down the street. There was nobody around. In an instant, I dashed into the women's room, blinded by panic. My heart stopped. Both stalls were locked and out of order. Then, in the heat of the moment, tears welling in my eyes, my body ready to explode with ungodly filth, I committed the most embarrassing act of my life. I dropped my pants, hoisted myself up, and took a monster shit in the sink. I took the most horrific dump of my life, in the sink of a women's public bathroom. And I fled. I returned to the apartment some time later, said good morning to my girlfriend, and tried to forget. Story 6. A coworker retired and I inherited one of his reports, which is one of my employer's key performance metrics. Every 2 weeks it would take him an entire 8-hour day to complete. The first week I was able to automate most of it down to 1 hour. Over the next nearly 10 years, I've improved it to the point that it runs in less than a minute, then 14 minutes to quality check it. I then spend the next 8 hours surfing Reddit, watching movies, doing whatever I want in my office from home. All this time, I've told my boss it takes me 8 hours to perform, and sometimes I'll tack on extra hours because of technical issues. No questions asked as long as it's in his inbox by COB Friday. About 8 years ago I had a conversation with a coworker who works for my boss. It turns out he receives the report on Monday and never reads it. It gets filed away and the only time they get looked at is during an audit. I've had to discuss the reports just twice, and showed them an SOP I wrote that demonstrates how it's done, without the automation. Auditor checks the box, next item. Whenever I'm on vacation, I turn the SOP over to someone else who'll have to compile the report by hand. When I get back, they've always mentioned how do you do all that in just 8 hours. At this point I've charged my boss nearly an entire year for sitting on my ass. Story 7. My poor neighbors. I went to a weird middle school that was half homeschool, half private school. I was home alone 2 days a week. Thanks, Mom and Dad. When I was about 12, my Xbox died. At the time, I frequently dog sat for my neighbor who was recently divorced with a younger kid. Kid was a dick. Bragged about getting double presents because 2 families and how his parents were richer than mine. He had an Xbox also. After my Xbox had the red ring, I put it in my backpack and crawled into the neighbor's doggy door when I knew no one was home. I swapped my bricked Xbox for his working one and snuck back out. No one ever knew. His dad bought him a new one right after, according to him. He complained about his lost saves for weeks, but damn young me was an asshole. I also borrowed a book from him once, skimmed it and read the ending, and convinced him I was a speed reader. He finished the series in a couple weeks after that. Something about a belt with magic stones, pre-Aragon. Additionally, I found his mom's alcohol stash once when dog sitting. I drank several mouthfuls of vodka and threw up off their back porch. He got in trouble for that. And finally, I used to sneak into their house, doggy door again. I was a small kid until puberty at 14. I occasionally printed pictures from their home printer to bring home. In hindsight, I was a criminal nuisance. At the time I felt like James Bond.